this computer. Not streaming. If we don't like it, we just scrub it away, but at least it's there. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Web3 Design Community Call, Design Dao edition, call number 1. Yay! So on the agenda, we had this idea. Well, we're going to discuss this idea of creating a Design Dao / agency for the community of designers. How do we do that? Why? And how do we create incentives? But let's do a first a round of intros. So Charlie, bring it away.
Oh yeah, everyone. I'm a designer. I joined the space a bit late in 2017 with Balance.io, and I did their crowdfunding campaign. I've never really had a job. It's worth saying, just on what we were discussing earlier. And I'm really interested in like new ways of working. The idea of going to a 9 to 5 I think is silly, and the idea of being stuck to one startup or company, I feel is really risky. You know, you're kind of placing all your chips on one card. So the idea of like a Design DAO is like really exciting for me. And most importantly, I'm freelance and I work alone a lot of the time. And to me, this could be like a really nice way of working with some other people and some amazing people as well. That's kind of like my personal incentive.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Peter.
Hi guys. I've been in space for about just under a year now. I mainly do product management, but I've been heavily been researching and playing around with various ways to structure an organization. Just sort of not only on the product management side of things, but I'm also looking to like seeing if there's a possibility of creating like, I guess, a middle ground between being a freelancer, working in a company as an employee, and creating your own company. There's various pros and cons to each, and there's various dynamics that are good. Potentially there's a new model of working, and I'm very interested in that.
Awesome. Matthias?
Yeah, so been in the blockchain space since like 2014, but just started working in it last year. I was with a company in New Zealand for a while, and it was a good time, but decided to come over to Europe, and there's just kind of so many different projects to potentially get involved with, and the kind of problem is that I guess when you're working on such new stuff, it's always a bit risky, and kind of mitigating that would be an interesting sort of potential outcome of having a Design DAO, kind of enable people to take a few more risks, work on some cool products, and so kind of just interested in the crypto economic side of stuff, kind of DAOs and whatnot. So it's it just seems up my alley to kind of get involved in the discussion.
Awesome. And on my side, I'm Beltran. I had 2 design agencies back in the day, so I've been like Charlie, never had a job. I always had been an entrepreneur and building my own job. I had a design agency first that did a lot of communication communication websites, videos, etc. And then I also had a production design company that produced interaction design, lamps, products, interior designs for third parties and ourselves. And so I know the ins and outs of the problems of having an agency and making payroll with an agency also. And right now I'm with ENS. I'm the UX designer with ENS, and we are proposing also the Web3 design system. So we have ecosystem-wide design projects. And with Akil and a couple of other people, we started this Web3 design group to bring more designers together. And it was natural that we said, hey, how do we work together? What can we do together, both for ourselves, for the community, and maybe, since we are entrepreneurs, for clients. And in the past, I've been teaching also a lot of design, and there were 2 case studies I've always showed as interesting. One was that of Quirky, and the other one was that of OpenIDO, where each designer that contributes to a project has a quotient of the project. And in Quirky, it also had an economical incentive, because that quotient, that percentage of ownership of the product that you contribute was turned into the profits of the product. You would have rights to a percentage of the profits. There's a lot to learn from that system, and I've been thinking about this since 2005. How do we build a community of designers? And today we have probably the structure, the incentive, and we are starting to get a community to do it. So this is why I'm interested in this. Alrighty. So what were you talking, Peter? I interrupted you before we started. We did our own round of intros. Why do we need a Design Dao for each of you?
I was really just talking about the various pros and cons of the, I guess, the various different types of lifestyles associated with being a freelancer, being an employee in a company, and as well as, say, growing your own company, growing your own business. And I was just saying, like in this, if you're relatively skilled, like especially in this space, as even with developers especially, like if you're a well-versed developer, a pretty skilled engineer with some experience, and you can work and develop Web3 products, like why would you what is the incentive? Why would you work for agency or company? What's the why? Hence, a lot of the engineers actually either freelance themselves, if not for fairly high-paying work, if not work for the most interesting products or projects that they're very interested in, if not ones where they're heavily aligned with, I'm seeing a lot of that pattern occur in the Web3 kind of space itself, but I also see as a occurring pattern just throughout, I guess, with agencies and typically Web2 as well. It's just, yeah, those are just like some initial thoughts. And, what if I talked about the three various lifestyles? What if you can actually find the middle ground where, you can actually, if you're fairly entrepreneurial, as a freelance designer, what if you find a cooperative kind of setup where you feel like you actually get your market worth through equity and actual project worth, while getting a wage, and having some level of sustainability, if not, I guess, the ability to work with others, in a team environment.
Right. Yeah, awesome. So a new exploration to answer your why, or to summarize, or try to summarize, you said you want to explore the Design Dao, to see how a designer, freelancer, the new opportunities for freelance designers to be part of something, but still be freelancing.
Correct.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I like that. Anybody else? Charlie? You had a lot of proposals also fleshed out already. So if you want to talk about that.
Yeah. As a bit of background, I started looking at this because my kind of like work philosophy for this year was this space is going to grow. And I was trying to work for a mixture of cash, just for day-to-day living, and then also earn equity or tokens in projects. And the way I kind of saw it was like an angel investor or a VC would invest in several startups or companies with the idea that only a few of them are going to be successful. And what I realized is that there was only so many companies I could work for, so I couldn't distribute risk very much. And my ideas behind like an agency structure was to create more of like a studio and pull people together, and then maybe start a design fund. And the idea is that you put into the fund for work you do, and in return of what you put in, you get a percentage back. And that's kind of like the loose structure. I didn't really take it much further until recently. I started looking at it more like a commercial side to build a studio myself and find people to partner with. And that's what I've been focused on for the last month alongside freelance work. And I'm just trying to get it ready to launch and find people to partner with. And I'm not sure how that sits alongside the DAO, because I think I kind of saw it more as a traditional structure. I kind of thought, well, let's get the clients first and then maybe make it a DAO later, because the client side is probably, the business side is more important than having a fancy structure, let's say. And then, but on the DAO side, I think what I really liked for Beltran's idea was kind of like this subscription model, or even the other ideas we're talking about like a patron model for teams. Because I really feel like this kind of like design commons, there's that UX law, which is users spend most of the time on other sites, but then everybody is building different design patterns. So if we build like the same design patterns collectively, and then everybody uses them, and they're the best ones, they're well researched by the best people, then the space will hopefully grow overall. So that's really interesting to me.
Awesome. Yeah, very good. So to summarize, I'll try to summarize again. You're interested in the commercial aspect of doing the agency kind of, where you want to find a way to both do the funding through a Patreon system, but also serving this client base through different people that can join projects on a spot on. And also for the purpose of saying we gather together, create those patterns together, and it's a collective effort. It makes sense that it's in a collective organization. Let's say, okay, cool, I like it. And Matthias, what about you? What do you think? Why do you think we need a Design Dao?
So there's a couple of reasons. Just given, number one, that I've come over here, and there's just so much going on that I'm now in a very odd position of not really being able to, choose a project. I guess there's so many interesting things to do, potential routes, things that could really contribute, but I don't know where to focus my energy. And it would be quite an interesting sort of way to make sure a lot of these different projects get the attention that they need, find the resources that they need, and all that sort of good stuff. After going through DEF CON and Web3 and seeing these sort of Telegram groups and stuff form up, like the Metacartel and open source Web3 design, there's some really awesome sort of design conversations going on. But it would be really awesome to see if there was a way to potentially incentivize people to actually work through that and execute them. A lot of the stuff I agree with Charlie as well, figuring out, working with these projects, particularly in the blockchain Web3 space, it can be very risky if you're working for equity, and figuring out a way to kind of diversify their risk and maybe establish a sort of collaborative portfolio would be probably very beneficial as well. Having common patterns and standards also is another great benefit from coming with that kind of collective hive mind type thing as well. And then just the discussion through what Beltran and stuff have been having in the Telegram chat. It's been quite fascinating to see if that would be something that could actually materialize and sort of work, I suppose. So yeah, but again, it's not going to happen unless there's conversations like this happening. So and again, that plays right back into that initial sort of thing. There's all these amazing sort of conversations happening, but not a lot of execution.
Yes. So you want to get into the execution, whereas we find a structure of incentives for designers to actually participate and build it together, this thing. You are more oriented towards the agency model as well, right? For clients, for pay, right?
Yes and no. I think there's kind of two approaches. You can take a more commercial approach, and then there's also kind of a more community approach as well, tapping into that sort of hive mind of really talented people in the space at the moment. But again, I think there's still that incentivization problem there. And potentially having a commercial route involved in the DAO as well would bring more people over to contributing to it, and potentially using some of the work that's established or setting guidelines for people that come in and try and commission work could potentially lead to some more contributions to the sort of design commons idea as well.
Okay. Yeah. No, I agree with all of you. I think it's important and needed. One of the reasons I think we need a Design DAO is also because Web3 design as a profession or as a knowledge base is so there's so very few little people that actually understand Web3 design, and we are starting to actually build what Web3 design actually is. and very few designers who understand the blockchain. So we want to have more companies, more products adopt both design, both a user perspective, but the knowledge about Web3 design is so reduced that it makes sense that we create a group of designers from different projects in the space that also move very fast to gather the knowledge together and share it, either for community and global interest purposes or for a profit if it's actually implementing, like you say, doing the hard work, which is something that is difficult to do because it's work. There's a lot of work in design as well. So yeah, the Design Dao, I was seeing it for this duality of purposes, for ourselves and for others. For ourselves to share the knowledge, because in different projects, in different contexts, if you're working with TCRs, you probably don't know about, I don't know, governance, or if you're working in governance, maybe you're not faced with commit and reveal patterns, or maybe you do, you know. So there's different patterns, many emerging very fast. It's so difficult to actually have a mindset for all of them, and it's good that we gather that knowledge and we create a hub for designers to tap that knowledge and say, hey, who else has been working on this, or who else is interested in working in design for governance, for example, and maybe 3 other people from 3 other projects, although they have their day jobs, they can join and bring that expertise to the table in a way that is incentivized and rewarded, of course, also. And the other reason also, we have a lot of needs for our own community that I think it helps to make decisions collectively in a structured manner. Like I've been trying to, very simple cases, like I've been trying to move us away from Telegram for some time, but I don't know what the decision is yet. It's very, people don't comment or whatever. If we have a structured decision-making process through a tool or whatever, we can talk about very more or faster about these kind of decisions, or how do we finance projects like the Web3 design system that everybody's working on, or what do we do for the design conference, and sub-projects that are not for profit, but that benefit the whole design community. How do we coordinate together for those? And so
I think
ideas. Yeah.
Sorry, you're gonna go on.
No, I'm done. If you want to summarize.
Oh. No, well, I think you bring up a really interesting point about democratizing the talent in this ecosystem. Even if it's on a consulting basis, you also need a legal organization to kind of take that in. If not, coordinate, you know, okay, who are the designers who are actually open to like kind of providing a service outside the 9 to 5, you know, like what areas are they working on? What are the rates, you know, as the agency would kind of work like in the beginning.
Yes.
Very interesting on that front. But yes, definitely a way to coordinate the commons of the design community. I definitely agree with that. Like I was saying in the beginning, like at the minimum, we should have like almost like we should almost have like a decentralized design lab, as you do, right? That kind of plugs into the real world. That it becomes a hub that attracts new designers. And at the minimum, it's like a web page with a Telegram join link.
Yes.
Obviously, it can be more, but I'm thinking very lean, you know, like at the minimum, what can it be? And I guess what's in my head, I've been like exploring this, how to actually conduct this for a software development kind of agency, aside the Design Dao, like basically creating a software development kind of just cooperative, and how to actually get that off the ground. And yeah, that's what's floating in my head. And I feel like, yeah, I think you would have some experience in input, especially with making payroll in the beginning, especially, you know, like that's why I feel like it's almost great that you begin with a bunch of freelancers where, you know, they're still working off the clients and the referral work. And then maybe you pull together, just imagine everyone's on a salary, you know, and everyone collectively decides, you know, what client work each person is going to take on. So it's almost like, instead of like being a freelancer, like I have a new piece of work, I'm just going to do it. You know, because you're part of this cooperative, you come to the circle with this new client work, you know, this is the scope, this is how much it is, you know, and say, I believe I should do it, and or we should do it, or whatever. Select the work, or you do it yourself, and that goes into the pool of the company, and everyone gets paid a wage, at least in the beginning, to seed that company. Because essentially, I feel like a big barrier to getting more people on board is just payroll. Having available capacity. But
Yes.
I think there's a lot of motivated people that want to contribute to the space and the design commons, but realistically speaking, you still gotta feed yourself and put a roof over your head. So it really does kind of exactly. It really does limit your ability to kind of contribute your free time or time at all. It is a really valuable resource, and you've really got to figure out an effective way for people to want to get involved.
I feel that it resonates with all of you, that you are more or less entrepreneurs, independent freelancer designs. That it resonates the fact that, hey, we need jobs, we need work. There's a lot of work to be done, and so the Design Dao / agency fits your bill. But incentivizing to participation is good not only for the commercial side, is for anything. Running the herding more than running communities is so difficult. Like today, for example, we should have our own community call, and like two groups of people fell down that we're going to do the community call, and this is our community call, improvised last minute. So if there is an incentive structure around this, it's a good thing to explore. I think we need also the Design DAO for two other things. One is to experiment with a DAO. We are in this space, and let's build something that we care and we play with. So to play with.
I'm totally on board with that. To me, I love organizational structures, and the idea of building a DAO sounds really cool. Even if there isn't a commercial side, I'd be happy to put some time, not all time, towards it, because it would be something cool.
But I think there is a commercial side, and a lot of ideas for the Design DAO came because in a certain moment this year I was receiving many requests, but of course I had my handfuls, and I still keep receiving some requests for jobs or works to be done, and I cannot take them because I have my hands full. But what if there's a community of people, of designers, who can participate? Hey, I'm interested in that. There's the sourcing part, there is the actual work to be done, and here relates also to one other important feature of why the DAO that I was forgetting to mention, which is there's so many different types of design, that also most people ignore. That there is a back-end developer and a front-end developer and a systems engineer or whatever. There is a security engineer, etc. There is different types of designers, and different types of projects require different type of design thinking, the design way of doing design, different types of designers. And so if we as a community gather our talents and our expertise in these different fields as well, we can gather together for the mission of a project and deliver that project with the expertise of these teams, of these people in the team, and maybe these other flow into another project. And from behavioral design, token design, the more strategic high-level design, to the lower, more details of UI and interface design, for example. There's different sets of skills in this space that are needed, and that I think it makes sense that we coordinate, even if we have jobs in spaces, in different places.
All right. Last point makes perfect sense. When I saw the fund, I didn't want to build an agency where it was you just bring in junior designers and almost outsource the work. I saw it more as bringing people with very specific skills in to do very specific parts, and that's how that makes sense.
Awesome. And Any other idea on why? Well, I think we brought it out quite well. On our agenda, we have how to design DAO, like going down into the details. What features or what things do you think we need, or the process and platforms? What do you guys think?
Well, I was quite into the idea of that that you pitched with regarding subscriptions or some sort of way of stakeholders to essentially buy into the collective knowledge or the collective of workers, I suppose. It was quite an interesting way of doing it rather than on a project by project basis as such. And I guess that is also another approach, is potentially figuring out a way that you've essentially got a registry of different people that can jump in and to any particular project that's pitched by a stakeholder. I think there's a multitude of different approaches. Potentially, you could even look at combining various different approaches into this agency. It's having the contact point for design in the Web3 space. Be quite an interesting way to tackle it. I don't know if you want to explain your idea a little bit more, but
oh, sure. Well, you mean about the subscription, right?
Yeah. Now the subscription / Patreon kind of model. I guess it's yes. It was a really interesting one. Kind of approaching it from more of a for the greater good type thing rather than a purely commercial approach.
Yeah, so it stemmed from it's an idea, of course. It's an initial idea. We need to refine it and talk it. It stemmed from that moment, like in June or July over there, that I was a bit overwhelmed with requests, and one way in which I could possibly participate in all or in more projects was that we could build this community or group of people, and instead of working full-time on the job, okay, we could have a designer in-house in the company, okay, and they are tapping onto this collective knowledge so that we do a higher level of design, and maybe operatively each designer in-house brings it down to actual to the actual needs of the company. So the idea was the company, instead of hiring one more designer full time, you are hiring an agency or a service where you are tapping onto the collective Web3 design knowledge, because other designers from different companies, from different expertise in Web3 are adding, and maybe they can suggest you. So the subscription is for the same in-house designer that I am, for example, the designer at ENS, but I can come to you and say, hey guys, who has experience with commit and reveals, for example? And today we do it informally, but maybe there is a project to be done there or a consultancy to be done there. And we can, for specific sprints, maybe 3 other people join and they get rewarded and paid. And so the funding was through this idea, was suggested also by a client, whereas they would be willing to pay a subscription every month to be part of this knowledge base, if you want. Of course, you need to meter how much you give and how much you are taking, but it's possible to do that. So that was the initial idea, but also it was used so that we are stakeholders in our own system. We maybe are paying our own subscription, like an association, to be part of this, and those funds are used collectively in a way that we collectively decide, different ideas.
Yeah. So essentially anyone who gets involved still has some skin in the game.
Yeah.
It was quite interesting. I mean, anecdotally, it was kind of. I actually went over to do it was a trial with a company in in Amsterdam, and throughout the process, we actually realized that it kind of pivoted, and rather than being a trial, it turned into a contract for token design halfway through. So it was kind of interesting that they had no idea that I came in as a product designer, but had this knowledge that they actually needed on a short-term basis. So that kind of credit system would be a really interesting way of approaching it.
Yeah, there's a lot of people. There's a lot of things people don't know about designers, and so that is one collective effort that we need to do. What did you say, Peter?
Yeah, good point. Yeah, it's like, wait, you just like all designers are graphic designers, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Oh, yeah, of course. We all know how
it's
to
like
do Sketch and Figma, and that's
yeah,
what we
course,
do.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
So that goes back to the why of the Design DAO. We need that educational or awareness function, and even you, Peter, that you worked on educating designers. We had that conversation.
Yeah. I dug into that problem, but just didn't have time to continue on that. I've like for about a year now, I've just been I've been part of a program where I was like a mentor for designers who went through online course, and I'd be their mentor that I would have a 1 hour chat with every week on their work and give feedback. And essentially, I feel like that could be actually very beneficial for a lot of junior designers, potentially along with a course that could be created. And me and Beltran had been looking into this quite a bit, and I just never had the capacity. But I would love for someone to like just dive into it. I think it's a really greenfield opportunity there. Yeah, like I still see, I agree with Charlie on like, this is all really interesting stuff. But I feel like it can all be figured out as value and clients kind of come in. And in the end, it's a business, and how you conduct the business is just vastly different, I guess.
I'm actually starting to feel that maybe there's two sides to it. Like the subscription side of it, where you're like creating like a design commons of resources. I think that really works well for the subscription. Where I get a little bit of difficulty with it is say that you are picking up a resource from it. That means that like a person with a specific skill, as Beltram was explaining with like ENS and stuff, that means that specific person's got to have some availability. So if they're in like an agency structure, they've kind of got to be on payroll. And that's where it becomes a little bit difficult, because that means it has to be huge. You have to have like a lot of people on payroll to make that work, and the subscription stuff to be quite big. And I wonder if there's like a way that the subscription model creates the design commons, the patterns, and all these kind of things which teams get involved with. And then when it becomes to specific project-based stuff, we create, it's the front in the agency, but then it creates a spoke. And the spoke would be putting a team together with the specific skills to then go in on like a more freelancey basis as it grows. I just thought that would be like a cool way of doing it. And just one more thing on the subscription model, I don't know how, I'm not very clued up on licensing and stuff, but maybe I thought there was a way where depending on the size of the company is how much they have to pay for the subscription. So if you're like, I don't know, Aragon, where you've got millions in funding, then you have to pay a considerable fee. But if you're a startup, you kind of can just use it on a freemium model. That was another thing.
Yeah, I think that is an appropriate differentiation. Sorry, you bring it on. I have somebody at the door. Continue. I'll be back.
Oh,
that's cool.
I think we had that discussion about because I think it's two very different sides to it, right? Because as soon as you start bringing in, project by project basis, I think there's obviously going to be a certain level of skill required, right? You want to be able to validate whether or not a particular person that you're commissioning from the DAO would be.
You want to vet them. I feel like it's really. I feel like how you'd go about kind of implementing this is essentially it needs to start out like a traditional agency, and how you divide up equity and rewards. That might be that you have a different structure for that, maybe in soft. I guess the legals and the DAO structure for it can come eventually later on. And if you think about it, a lot of the deal flow really of an agency really comes from just doing continuous work. You know,
yes, the retainers are gold. It's just you always want the retainers. Yeah,
exactly right. And I might be skipping to the why. I mean, the how maybe, you know, section of this talk, but you know, I've been, because maybe like like I think we should just in terms of execution, it should be treated like a normal business.
Yeah, exactly. Approaching it from the retainer, the retainer model would be quite interesting. Yeah, because I mean, I think there's a lot of value in kind of sourcing everyone's contributions. You know, there's a lot of people that might have very valuable skill sets, but potentially not monetizable in the traditional sense. You know, and locking those people out could be problematic. You know, you're locking out.
So a lot of ways how a lot of agencies start up is simply through a network of freelancers. Basically a project manager doing sales and someone who actually does design work, kind of doing deal flow, and then they would have access to a group of their friends. You know, a bunch of designers, various project managers. Whenever a job comes in, you assemble a team, get the team together, right? And then this is normally how a lot of agencies start, just like rinse and repeat until you can actually pay themselves or have the right amount of revenue going through as payroll. Otherwise, you'd be treated as individual contractors until that can be, you know. And I guess at some point, it's actually worthwhile to actually set up a company and behave like one. But I've seen that model kind of occur various times, you know, just even agencies, you know, like even obviously not everyone can have like a freelance I guess illustrator on payroll 100% of the time. So that's often a specialty role which you often bring in just for various jobs.
Sounds like it sounds like exactly what I'm trying to do now is that I've got lots of demand for work, and I'm now starting to build it into the agency structure. And the idea is that I'll just bring in the pool of people that I meet in the blockchain space and designers to work together. And then my idea was eventually, as it scales up and more projects in, then it would be able to then start to pay people salaries, and they'd be less freelancing, and it would become more commercial as a result. But yeah, it makes sense. That's the way things work. It's like you need the business, and then the structure comes later. It's also the startup. You need the users, and then you can start to think about making it a corporation and that kind of thing.
I think
there's two steps to this. You know, there's the initial starting up an actual business corporation kind of thing, and then eventually, provided that the model works, you can start to migrate it to more of a cooperative kind of style.
I think the idea of having a subscription is interesting. It's a very interesting way of providing services, but I feel like that in the beginning, you're going to find on the demand side that might be hard to generate enough to actually provide a meaningful amount of essentially food on the table. So that's why I actually think in terms of going, I guess maybe I feel like we've come explore a lot of the why. I may be skipping over to the how. You know, and I think it's just, I'm filling you on what we talked about, Beltran, what your way. I was just saying, like, you know, I feel like it's going to end up like a traditional agency model, and the incentive structure and org structure might change and might be different. And I feel like the concept of subscriptions is interesting. That might come in later, but I feel like you're really on point with crowdsourcing the knowledge of the whole ecosystem, having our contacts list of various designers and the expertise, and being able to contact them straight away and bringing them in for specific jobs. I mean, that's how normal agencies operate anyways. And I talked about how like a lot of agencies I've learned, I know, started off bootstrapping by just having a network of designers or freelance designers that, you know, and various project managers. And, you know, someone finds a deal, they find a PM, or they're the PM, and they find the various designers they need to fill in to take the job. They put the team together, and maybe use this network over and over again until we realize, hey, you know, we can actually have a few designers on payroll. We have enough deal flow, you know. And I feel like that potentially might be a leaner, more realistic way, yet very hard but simple way to go about it. It is still building a business and an agency. It's not fucking easy, right? Like,
absolutely.
It's what I want to do. So it's
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. In the meantime, Minette joined us. Did she introduce herself? Or Minette, did you tell us why you are interested in the DAO? Or sorry, I missed a bit.
Hi, sorry. I was hoping you guys would have noticed that I came in late.
Okay. Are you interested in the Design Dao as well?
Yeah, I'm kind of curious, to learn about it. I really, it's an interesting idea. I wanted to know where you were going to take it. So hi everybody, I'm UX designer Gnosis for those of y'all haven't met me yet. So, yeah, the idea of using a DAO for developing some of these design systems is interesting. It seems complicated. So very curious. But it sounds like at the moment you're just thinking about ways to kind of kickstart it. Right? So maybe it would be interesting to take a small piece of this huge project, like a very specific project, that we can kind of test drive like a Design DAO with. That would be kind of my thoughts, and to sort of kind of as a proof of concept kind of thing. And we'll learn a lot from doing something really small. So anyway.
Yeah, like
That's
kind of a test, right? It's like how can we find generate a strong signal for this while doing the least amount of possible work?
Yes.
That's really important.
The thing is that at the beginning we talked about why the DAO, and this is how the DAO, and which I think is good. We should move on to that. Why the DAO? It has two parts. Here there's a large community of people that want to make it into an agency for client work, for business or oriented purposes, but there is also the other community-oriented aspect, tools for ourselves to make decisions together, to organize the different projects like the design conference we were talking about, Minette, in other occasions, or stuff like that. And I agree with you. Let's tackle one or different groups of people can tackle one project in each area to see how we do it. But continue.
I also think, sorry, maybe just one last thought. It would be very important to distinguish the role of the Design DAO from the Bounties Network, which also does a lot in terms of letting folks do some of the outsourcing for design projects and things. So, but yeah, anyway, you guys were on some thought earlier, but this too.
Yeah, that's actually quite an interesting point, because I was just looking at was it Gitcoin, right? And it seems to be fantastic. There's a lot of activity and stuff there, but that is very, very, very much development focused, right? It's kind of interesting to me that there really doesn't seem to be. I don't know if it's a supply demand issue, or if it is just that there isn't interest in it, but there is not a lot of design work on it. Like pure design.
Yeah. Oh, well, actually, so the way that I understand it, Gitcoin is really for software developers and software development, and the Bounties Network is a completely separate platform that's used for design and also for user testing and for other things. So I think it's important.
I think the Bounties Network, from what I've seen so far, seems to be quite sporadic. There's not a lot of actual focus on any particular kind of issue. It would be. I wonder if that's potentially a branding issue or not, but I'm not entirely sure, because there's
I think
a
it's
lot
still
of stuff
early. That's why.
Yeah, exactly, right. Yeah,
It's
but it's quite interesting that like Gitcoin took off, right? But there really just doesn't seem to be any sort of pickup in the amount of bounties available for designers, right?
Well,
I find with like the Gitcoin I find with the Gitcoin and the bounty stuff is that it's kind of difficult with design, because on the client side, they might not necessarily know what they need specifically from a designer. It very much works for software development, because you're like, right, okay, I need this many lines of code written in this specific skill, and they know what it is. But when it comes to design, they don't really know if they need to focus on what specific skill, and that's where it becomes a little bit difficult.
Yeah, it's true that in general, for clients that approach designers, design agency, etc., you need to do some work with them to discover what the real problem is and what the solution they need is. This is common in agency work, and especially in this space. Some people come asking for tokenomics, but they really need a strategy, you know, or a business model design before even getting down to the idea of building or creating a token that has a system and an economics. And it's true that bounties also, it's one of the funding possibilities. Right now, if you leave it to the client to define what the bounty is, you see very little funds allocated to some projects, sometimes without knowledge of how much work actually is. Or sometimes you have this limitation where they ask for a logo when they need something else or whatever. So maybe there is an opportunity to use bounties in a reverse way, whereas we designers say, hey, we want to work on a governance communication system, for example, or whatever, or this project. And we say the resources, the money that it needs, and we go out to hunt bounties, and we have a bounty that is like a crowdfunding, if you want, but maybe somebody can fund it progressively or partially, and it's a crowdfunding again, if you want.
This sounds perfect for an I'm not an Aragon, I mean a Giveth DAC.
Yeah, of course. It's one of the structures. We could move on to the platforms. I want to summarize some of the ideas we talked here for funding sources. We talked about company subscription, paying a monthly subscription. It's true, maybe there is not enough food on the table to put food on the table. Maybe that's something to think about. Designers, our own subscription, like if it was the association, we pay a fee to have access to our own network or to fund our own projects. We are token holders of our own Design Dao, if you want. But Patreon from individuals or other people that are just interested. There's grants and sponsorship. We haven't talked about that, but I think building DAOs today, concrete DAOs, we could gather sponsorship to experiment with the DAO in itself and with the functionality, and also to experiment with the liberal radicalism idea of that they said that they want to have designers thinking about that. We talked about client work and doing research for client work specific, and this idea of bounties. Did I forget anything? That's it. So, okay, yeah.
Silence is good.
Sorry?
Silence is good.
Silence is good, no. So we need in our roadmap, we have platforms and incentive to participation. What do you guys think? Let's talk about that. I think that is interesting. Or I like Minette's idea of starting with a test drive project. If it was us, if it was each of you, which project would you like to tackle, and how would you structure the incentives? Brainstorming. Darling, or yeah, go ahead. Or Minette.
You're talking to me?
Yeah, go ahead. Which project would you like?
I need to think about it. I don't know. Give me time to think about that one. I didn't come prepared for a project. It was a good idea. Yeah,
I think
I'm the same. I need time to think about that.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the questions is like, what is like the big overarching purpose for doing this, right? So that will determine the kind of project that would be appropriate. Like, are we doing this to? What problem is it solving, basically?
Yeah. So what we can do is in our HackMD panel right after, or in these next days, we just jot down an index of ideas of different projects that we could be working on, or that maybe we are interested in working on, and and maybe we filter or from that, or in the next call we brainstorm starting from that on the kind of projects. And
yeah, potentially the next call might be on understanding the first step to take, or if not the first few baby steps.
Yes.
All the tests, or the or essentially, I'd say yeah, that might be the or the how do we actually validate this?
Yes.
What's the smallest thing we should build to get to see if it works?
Yeah, I mean, there's various components a part of what we discussed that might be a part of this DAO structure or this organization, which may require various, I guess, pieces of validation. Like, for example, a community kind of organization that is basically acts like a full service creative agency. I think work would, if we receive work, that that would be a good sign. Potentially, maybe yes, maybe no, depending on what assumptions we make, right? But I think hypothetically that might be a good signal on stuff such as providing the subscriptions, or having a network of consultants or if not designers in the space. We would have to I guess validate both sides, whether to see if it can work, company side, people side.
Yeah, I'd be quite interested to see if that idea of are people actually interested in potentially having a buy-in of sorts, and staking a bit of their either money or reputation on getting involved in the project. It would be quite an interesting thing to see if we could pull some more people into the think tank. It actually might be quite a good first step, as to get it outside of this group of 5 people. Can we figure out can we validate, will people stake their reputation on getting involved in potentially establishing these
realistically, seeing out a few projects, I actually say I disagree with that. I feel like we should stick as small as we can and make sure this works amongst a small team, or a small 2 or 3 group of freelancers before more discussion and thoughts are good, and maybe you can have that along the way. But being a PM, I'm thinking about what is the leanest, most realistic kind of pathway forward. And I see it as growing a business, or agency or organization providing design services. That's kind of the most basic kind of step that I foresee ahead, that will need to be conquered, that first big mountain that will need to be conquered before everything else comes. And maybe that's kind of the execution of the thing. But then these conversations are very helpful, very meaningful, on realizing and I guess conceptualizing it, as well as comprehending why we want to do this, how we want to shape it, because they're really they're often highly philosophical at many times as well, but those are just my thoughts. So I'm fairly pedantic on seeing a clear cut kind of road potentially ahead, even if it's through various tests. But I'm fairly pessimistic about community involvement with heavily involved projects like this. That's why I really like the idea of beginning with maybe even 2 freelancers, or 2 or 3 freelancers. I really, because it naturally works. No one's committed to a project for indefinitely,
Yeah, but this is where the discussion about the incentives comes in, because and there's one test that we can do. So right now in this room we have 4 people part-times, and Minette, you're full-time, right, on Gnosis? Okay, so we are 4 part-time. We have time for other things, and we probably are actively looking for other things. 2 of you are in the agency mode. I'm a designer, I freelance, I do this work. But if we want to bring in the participation of the other designers who are full-time in projects like Minette is, we need to test also with them to see what would motivate them to do it, both project-wise and financially, and if they can do it. So question for you, Minette. These are 3 questions for you. Or 2 questions.
That's a really good question. I think it's difficult because, of course, there's a lot of pressure for people who are working full-time on projects. Gotta think about that one. Of course, if it has something to do with if it has something to do, for example, with the design systems that people might be already trying to implement within their own projects, then it makes sense to be participant because you're participants in something that you will have to use. Or maybe in research.
Yes. How about maybe, for example, a scenario, Charlie, Matthias, and Peter are working on a project for client X, a super company in the space or a super upcoming company in the space, and they would like to have some reviews on their progress or have a brainstorming about their problem, etc. Would you join as a high-level idea giver or supervisor or giving feedback without doing exactly the work, but would you participate in that kind of context?
Depends on the product cycle we're in.
What do you mean? From the beginning, but not in the middle, or?
It depends on how busy I am at the moment.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I like how you packaged it like nicely, and it's like.
No, I kind of feel like with the agency structure, you could bring in experts even if it's for short-term stuff. So if someone has a full-time job, you know, like I know a lot of designers who have worked full-time for agencies, but they want to work on other things as well. So if they can come in for like a little tiny bit, that's great too.
Awesome.
Agreed. Yeah.
And it's true about the incentives. I think those that make the work should be paid, and we need to find a way. Maybe that is the way in which what the client pays for. They pay mainly for the active participants, and a part for those high-level consultancy. How do we? Well, let's turn it upside down and into how might we? Or the idea is, we are a community of people who work in awesome problems, in awesome projects with different types of problems. And so each of us has a different experience. How might we tap into that experience? One idea is to, hey, Minette, join us for a brainstorming, like we were talking earlier on. Or do you guys come up with any idea or see any other possibilities?
One thing I've been talking to another guy about is design sprints, the Google Ventures Jake Knapp system. And Matthias, I think you met it, and Reg yesterday or today, I can't remember.
Yeah.
And he wants to set them up remotely. And he's kind of thinking in that kind of, well, we started a discussion where a project has a UX problem, which we know lots do. You could kind of come in and do a design sprint to help solve the UX problem for them. And there could be like a reward mechanism where at the end of it, everybody labels how much participation people made in it, and then they got rewarded as a result for participation in like a peer-reviewed system. I feel like I'm paraphrasing his ideas because I know he's given it a lot more thought, and I wish he was on the call. But yeah, I hope I haven't done him injustice there.
I flicked him an invite, but yeah, we had some really interesting discussions yesterday about it, and you know, just as a kind of prototyping type mechanism, we were looking at possibly the idea of, you know, if you wanted to get involved, the idea of putting, you know, staking something on your participation. So if you genuinely think that you're hot shit and you can really contribute to a particular project or something, the idea of, you know, backing up your talk with some sort of you know, something either reputation based or you know, monetarily based to get involved, and at the end of it, it's assessed by the rest of the team or the client. It would be kind of an interesting way to potentially prototype that.
I mean, usually when someone
sorry, I think I might have dropped out.
Sorry?
You're talking. So normally typically like the staking part is just commitment of unpaid time to make it work.
Yeah.
Usually.
Yeah, but there's kind of I guess there's a bit of a problem, right? Where when you're looking at if you're looking at something that's quite time limited or something, like for example, if you were taking on a specific project or doing a design sprint and you jump into that and then disappear off the map or don't contribute something that's actually considered valuable, that's generally a huge waste of time, and that can be a really big problem, particularly when you're doing remote based work, is there's no real way to validate if you're working on it or if you're doing anything like that. So I think there does actually need to be some sort of something at stake in order for that sort of model to work efficiently.
So yeah, it's one form to study, and all reputation and staking can be experimented upon.
Sorry, my internet is yeah, sorry, I just missed that last bit there. The internet's a bit wacky here.
No, I was just saying, yeah, staking, it's one possibility for sure. There's a lot of different models to create incentives, and it all depends again on who is doing what. Like if you are the freelancer and you're doing only projects for clients, you for sure will be able or willing to stake, will do this, you have the time.
Yeah.
But what if it's Minette or it's me, we are our hands full, they say, hey, maybe I participate in one thing, but I cannot commit to the full thing. I will hear you, I will give you some ideas. If I like the project, maybe we'll...
I think that it's interesting is that idea of figuring out, how to quantify particular types of work, right? And I know that design is particularly subjective, but for example, Andre and I were having this discussion yesterday, is that, the idea of putting together, going from wireframes to say high level fidelity prototyping is considerably more quantifiable than, say bringing one of you guys in for an hour-long brainstorming session. How exactly can you figure out how to do that?
Well, there's a lot of research done by this also in the DAO companies like Colony. All their white paper is about how you actually tokenize or give a percentage to the actual work done. There is Wetonomy. They are working on Aragon to create such a system on Aragon. So there's a lot of research done and being done. In the past, there was a lot of research also done for projects that have nothing to do with the blockchain. Like I mentioned, OpenIDO, they had a design quotient that they assigned to the different people participating. Or Quirky as well. They had this system whereas anybody could join very anarchically, okay? Somebody launches an idea, or launched because it failed the company. And we could go into why it failed. But somebody launched the idea and immediately got like 15 or 25% because of the idea, if it gets picked up, okay? 15 or 25% of the revenue of the idea, once it's sold, produced and sold, will go to the guy or girl who gave the idea. Then somebody else comes in and say, hey, I like this project, but we need to restructure this. I'm good with product design. I will design a thing. I'm good with engineering. I'll add this. I'm good with branding. I'll do the logo and communication. I'm good with packaging. And so different people join quite anarchically, but the same group of people that are already participating are those that vote if those people are good to come in and if their work is good or not. So everybody votes whether part of the work you're doing is good or not. And at the end, you have this percentage of ownership of the final product, which is given progressively during all the steps of the way. You get a percentage of that ownership more or less. If somebody else comes in and gives a lot of contribution, the others will get diluted in part, etc. And that reaps the benefits, but is also self-organized. Is the group of people who dynamically start participating, who have stake in the game, who evaluate the stake in others. And also I think it was also the community outside. We could find it again. I've been giving it as an example because it was really excellent way of crowdsourcing work for design and creative work.
I think that all these ideas are really, really great. I'm just wondering, they're quite complex, and really, you know, maybe it's worth, as Peter was saying, like really focusing on just like the traditional agency structure where you start a project and everybody gets paid as you would normally, and then as it builds up, you can then start to bring in these ideas later down the road.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Yeah, it's hard to do both at once.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I think even if it is just say us five in the call, you know, like if we set up an agency, there's still going to be some element of trust. So, you know, it'd be interesting to figure out if, you know, we can just five people, you know, like can we figure out if we got a client or we had a pool or hypothetical, you know, whatever, how do we get each of us to guarantee that whatever percentage of contribution we're going to have to that final contract price or whatever is you know, we're going to contribute the work to earn that, you know.
Well, there's a bit of research to be done and bringing in the call other designers from these other companies. Like Colony has Pat, he's in the community. Aragon has Yoni, and he's in the community. And we need to find a better time for these people to participate. So the next one we'll do a call for all of them to come and tell us the platforms. We probably need to test these platforms. And I personally am interested, especially in the community-wide participation first and client second. But I understand that all these things can go together. If there's 3 people working on the incentives for client work, or other people working on, hey, I'm interested in the Web3 design system or in the design conference. And the idea of a DAO is that is also holocratic. Different people decide on what to work and get together, and we have together a structure to make all projects possible. Some will get more money because you do full-time work, and others will get less money because they are for the greater good, or because there's less funding for them. I don't know, but yeah. So something.
I quite like that point you brought up earlier about maybe choosing a particular. You know, if anyone here is interested in, you know, we could try validating with a project, or we could try validating with, say, I don't know, a common goal. So if, you know, for example, we wanted to work on one particular aspect, I mean, it might be quite interesting, for example, like the meta cartel stuff, for example, right? If you were going to have one particular project, so relay networks or something, right? If you were gonna do that, could you actually seek a community-funded grant that was allocated to the people that participated in contributing research, you know, smart contract design, anything like that? That's 2 potential avenues, you know.
Yeah, if we create a DAO and we have community projects, it's very easy that we can ask for grants, for funding from organizations who give grants. Not very many left, but yeah, it's absolutely possible. And we need, in certain cases, to have legal entities. And Aragon has a whole set of people working on DAOs and the interaction with the real world. Maybe they will solve it. You were talking earlier about the cooperative, and probably that is the way to go. You know, it's a cooperative, but we need to see in which jurisdiction it makes appropriate. Boris Mann, Peter told me he was working on a project called Spades Builder, and we talked together about this, about the idea of, hey, there is already one legal entity that can facilitate a lot of legal stuff, you know, payroll, accounting, taxes, receiving the grants in a bank, or managing that. If it's crypto, we can have a multi-sig altogether, and we decide these kind of things. But okay, I think we've went 1 hour longer, and if you guys do you guys want to continue the call, or we stop here and we do the work and reconvene next time?
I think it's probably good that we have maybe like a just to summarize, well, not necessarily summarize the goal, but come up with like an action point. Just at the very end.
Okay.
What are we doing at the end of this?
You want to do it? Go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess if that idea of potentially choosing a project to kind of come out with, but it might be interesting if everyone contributes to the HackMD document, a potential way of validating perhaps client-based work and perhaps community-based approach as well. I know that as we said, three of us are more commercially oriented and you're more community sort of collective focused. So that might be quite an interesting approach in seeing if we can find a validation project.
Okay, awesome. And so we write in the HackMD this list of ideas about how to validate client-based work, community-based work. We talk about the possible, and let's build a list of ideas for projects that we think we can work on, or that the Design Dao could work on, or that we need, and maybe we start from there. And I'm interested in the community-wide project also, so that we bring more of the other designers to the table and see what other people want as well, to hear their ideas. So yeah, will you write this up in the HackMD?
Yeah, I can tackle the call to action type thing. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. And each of us, Minette, Charlie, Peter, myself, and you yourself, of course, we can add to the list of ideas of projects that we could work on, and anything else, incentives, ideas, etc. And
sounds really good.
How often do you feel we need to have these calls? One next week is too soon, or
I feel like time-based calls don't make too much sense. I feel like it should be calls as needed, as by progress, if not on a needed basis. So it's like, oh, okay, we made some progress. We've digested our discussion today. There's a lot of ideas and a lot of things to bake in our head. Okay. Really, give it a couple of days, look over the notes, and I feel like maybe then we start chatting about maybe, we look at the first actions. Yeah, and then we're like, okay, I think we're ready for the next call, and maybe we come up with something.
Do we need a separate Telegram group?
There was one pulled up already, isn't it?
Geez.
Yes, that's right. There is one.
Oh, there's
this
the
really
test one that I started.
There's the design agency.
Yeah.
Alrighty, all right. Yeah, you need to maybe make it into a super group, or have us a way to invite other designers who want to join the call, or maybe we post it on the Conflux. Well, whatever you feel.
We should make an elective decision now to avoid Telegram. Something else we want to use.
That's probably
Telegram is great.
No. Telegram is amazing. You wake up and you just you're in a sea of various. It's almost like Telegram. You're living amongst connections of people, threads of topics and conversations. It's amazing.
Yeah, but it's not useful.
It's like an intellectual spider web. I think it's really useful, actually.
No,
because it almost
discussion.
It almost seamlessly connects. It integrates various threads of topics of interest into your daily social life without.
Yes, but right now, for example, if you try to go back and find where something was said, useless. You cannot go. Yeah. If you have different conversations, like the Design Dao, like the Design Dao agency and the Design Dao for the community, it gets a mess. We have already 8 or 9 different chats. Our group, the Web3 design group, has 8 or 9 different chats. So it's
and if they die and they don't come up again, then they're pretty much dead, right? We don't have to remember them.
They die.
And
also.
They just happen again and again and again.
Exactly. I mean, sure, but it's like plastic bags. You use them, throw it away. Hey,
You should not say that, especially with me. First, you do not buy plastic bags. You should not do that. Second, you should not throw away, please. You're a designer too.
Reduce, reuse,
your
recycle,
barrier
man.
reef
Come on.
in Australia just died just a few months ago.
It's all your fault,
Not
Peter.
say that. We are designers. Okay.
I find Telegram's really good for when you're like talking one-on-one, just at exactly the same time. It's like different to a phone call, but you can type. So maybe it's best to have the big stuff in Conflux, but if you want to have like a little one-on-one discussion, then that Telegram is a good place. But then summarize it back in the forum afterwards.
Yes.
I potentially is Slack cool? I have no idea. I love Slack because of the Reacts, but Slack's not cool. Okay, all right. Is there a version of Slack that is cool and has cool React?
Rocket Chat is the best chat.
Guys, I'm gonna go.
Okay.
See you soon.
Thanks for coming.
On that note, I'm going to introduce a new designer on the Telegram channel. Please give her a warm welcome.
Sure. Absolutely.
See you guys later. Ciao.
See you soon. Cheers.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Okay.
Yeah, guys, I need to go get some breakfast. So this feels like a nice ending.
All right. Yeah. Well, I'll set up a rocket chat because I mean just for the fact that we can split it into two channels and have one that's focused around commercial work and one that's focused around community work. That's probably a good starting point.
No. For us, for now, let's use the Telegram. We are 5. We have that one. But for the
yeah. True.
Rocket Chat, but it needs to be concentrated. Everybody knows.
No, I'm gonna go on bounties.network and make people bounty to like make a bounty for people to throw their rubbish like bags away.
No.
You know, like to clean up. Like they have the clean up the ocean bounty. I'm just
throw them into the ocean.
I'll send you a link to we talked with Dan Finlay a few days ago about he asked a good question. What are you doing against global warming? And you should read the reply to that. I will post that. Alrighty. Guys, talk to you soon. It was awesome. Let's keep the conversation going. Alrighty?
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.